intimidated by the developers, and I have heard horror stories. Hello, welcome to this video. Today I'm going to tell you a few tips for brand new QA. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Madeline. I have been a quality assurance analyst for a software company for a year and 3 months now. I am a manual QA, and since I started posting my work type content on YouTube, I got a lot of questions about software testing, which I was not expecting. I didn't think anybody would want to hear about my job, but I was wrong. So I wanted to make just a quick video for people who are new to QA, just a few tips, some advice I would give, things that I have learned since I started. First, a few disclaimers. I do manual QA, not automation QA. We do some automated tests sometimes at my work, but the bulk of my work is writing up my own test cases and then going through them and documenting that they're successful. And then when they're not, I work with the developers to find where the problem is, they fix it, and then I test the fix. I will not have any tips for automation because I'm not qualified to give such advice, and I'm not going to be going into super technical details because I think this job is so specific, and even within my own company, I don't think I could give technical tips to someone in a different module because there's just so much specificity within software. But I did come up with a few things that I think in general will help any software testers. Lastly, I've been doing this for a year and 3 months, but only at one company in one team. So this is just based on my experience. Your experience as a software tester could be totally different. Hopefully these tips still hold true, but just know this is just based on my own experience. Okay, tip number 1 is ask all the questions, but be as specific as possible. So don't be afraid to ask questions to other QA on your team, to your team leads, to the developers, to the product manager. Ask questions. In our meetings where we figure out our new development, asking questions is so important. I think at first I was scared too because I thought I just didn't understand it. I assumed everyone else already knew all these answers. But once I started asking my questions, I realized that a lot of the times other people had the same questions, or it was something that we hadn't thought about yet. Questions like, how is this component going to interact with this component? What do we expect to happen if the user does this? Does this match with the rest of this page? Go ahead and ask those questions. I think framing things as a question is also easier when you're in meetings where people have different opinions. Instead of saying, this doesn't match this page, phrase it as a question. Does this match this page? Just bring it up, food for thought. And then also when you're testing, if you come across something strange or you think something's not working, go ahead and ask. But this is where the specifics are going to come into play. Now that I'm in a position where sometimes people are asking me questions, I found it's really helpful if they are as specific as possible from the beginning. So if I come across a page and I click a button and the button doesn't work, instead of immediately messaging the other QA and just saying, hey, this button isn't working, or is this button not working for you? Instead, I'm going to be as specific as possible. So I'm going to tell them the environment I'm testing on, the user I'm logged in as. I'm going to have screenshots or a video, how I navigated to that page, as many specifics as possible so that there's just fewer back and forth and we waste less time. A lot of times these bugs are very specific and it doesn't just happen all the time. Sometimes they do. Sometimes something's just completely broken. But a lot of the times it's the specific way you went about it, and the other person needs to be able to recreate those steps in order to find what's really wrong. Don't be afraid to ask your questions, but take a second to get kind of your story together, know how you created that error and if you can recreate it, and then send all that information. And I think the person you're asking will really appreciate that. My second tip for new QA is to build relationships with your developers. I think when I first started this job, I was intimidated by the developers because they literally are working in a different language. I don't know any coding languages. I get this question a lot. I don't know any coding languages. I'm sure it would be super helpful if I did, and I'm starting to pick up on little bits and pieces here and there, but I am still amazed by the developers, and I just think They're basically magic, but I was definitely intimidated, so I would only ask other QA different questions. And I had to get over that because the developers have so much knowledge and they're the ones literally building this thing, this web page, this application, whatever it is you're testing. So they are great resources to ask questions. Like if I don't know the expected outcome of something, yeah, they're just a great resource. It's also very important to build a relationship with the developers that you work with, because as a quality assurance analyst, my job is to find things wrong with their work. In my personal life, I would not do this. I don't want to nitpick other people. So it can be kind of strange when your whole work is to tell someone like, hey, this is broken. That's why it's so important to build a relationship with your developers where they feel valued and they know that you appreciate their work and that you're just coming from a place as a team where you're trying to put the best product together. You don't want to be in opposition. You really want to be a team that's working on it together. I think that makes a much more enjoyable work experience. It can be exciting sometimes to find a bug, especially when you first start out, because you're like, hey, I'm doing it, I found something wrong. But you obviously don't want that to come across as you rubbing it in the developer's face or anything. And sometimes there can be confusion or just things that I don't understand about the development process. So things might take longer than I would think they should, or the fix could be installed and it could still be broken. But I think it's just important to always approach it with assuming the best about your developers, because they're just trying to do the best job they can too. This next tip, I think this is a pretty general one. Like I said, I've only worked at this company, so I really don't know how other software companies do their testing, but this tip is always double check the environment you are working on. So as QA, at least in my experience, we have a few different environments where we test the code before we release it to live, before clients use the code. But we also have access to live because sometimes you need to troubleshoot on there and you need to test things on there. It could just be so bad if you're just going about your business, testing something, making all these changes, and it turns out you are on live and you are making real life changes that could be catastrophic. Always double check your environment. For me, that means checking like the URL that I'm on. I've been there for a year and 3 months and I still every single day periodically just double check the environment that I'm on. The most important part of your job as QA is keeping that live environment safe for the user. So any testing accidentally done on the live environment could have very negative consequences. And I have heard horror stories of people who are very new at the job just going through their day, testing away, doing like regression checklists, making lots of changes on live to a real client. So double check your environment. And my fourth tip is to keep testing notes for yourself. There can be a lot of stuff to keep track of. You're probably working on multiple issues for your project that are in different places as far as bugs reported, bugs fixed, expectations, what testing environment they're on. I started, I think like 6 months in, I started keeping notes. I just make a little chart. I have the project number, I have a column for bugs reported, a column for bugs fixed, and then a column just for notes. In the notes column, if there is anything that I just think I'm gonna forget, anything that the developer said, hey, make sure you double check this, I'll put it in that notes section. Or if I need to communicate with someone about something and I haven't gotten to do it yet, I'll put it there. I also keep track of the testing environment that it's on there and if I've asked for it to be merged or not. And the bugs reported, obviously once I report a bug to a developer, I put it in that column. And then once it's fixed, I move it over to the bugs fixed column and I like strike through it, but I keep it there until the issue is completely released. That way, if something comes up, I can remember that like, oh, we've already dealt with this, or I'll know to double check for that. This has been super useful for me. I used to have to go back through our Teams messages to see if I had reported something or not, and if the developer had responded or not, and it just felt very chaotic. So now I have this one place where I just dump everything I need to know, and then keep it there until I don't need to know it anymore, and then I delete it. This also helps with my work-life balance because at 5 p.m. every day, I can just log off of work and not think about it. There's nothing that I'm like worried I'm gonna forget because it's all written down. It's there and it'll remind me Monday morning. I don't have to worry about forgetting stuff over the weekend. Write down as much as you can, keep a testing note document. And tip number 5, don't expect to be perfect. When you're first starting this kind of job, there's a lot to learn and it can feel really overwhelming. And honestly, it still feels overwhelming to me sometimes. It's way better to work slowly and thoroughly than to try to rush and meet all your deadlines. But even being slow and thorough, you're gonna miss stuff because we're human and that just happens sometimes. You might not realize that code is touched somewhere else or code from another team could mix with yours and you're just gonna miss stuff. It's gonna happen. It does suck. I hate not doing something very well, but it happens. The important thing is to use those times as a lesson. I think some of my best testing practices have come from bugs that I missed. So things with like user permissions or using outside services. I'm trying not to get super specific here again, but just things that have caused a really big problem on live because I missed them. Because I'm not perfect, influence all my other testing and make me a better tester after that and help me be more thorough. Yeah, you only have to miss something once to really not want to miss it again. So don't expect yourself to be perfect. Just kind of take a deep breath, be thorough, think it through, and you'll figure it out. Okay, those are my tips. Now I'm gonna take a few minutes to answer some questions that I get asked quite frequently. Most of these I've already answered before, but I know people don't watch every single video. So one question I get asked a lot is if I do manual or automation QA. I do manual QA. I do think automation is becoming more and more integral in the testing process. And I believe my company is working to incorporate more automation. So I'm gonna have to get more comfortable with that. We do have a tool that my company developed specifically for my company and we use that tool. So I'm not gonna give out any specifics there. That is something I'm gonna be working on and learning in the near future. But currently I'd say I'm like 98% manual QA. And people often ask if I did a school or boot camp for QA, and I did not. I do have an undergraduate degree in English education, and a degree was required for my job, but not like a computer science degree, not any like specific testing certification. I don't know if this is common or not, I'm sorry. I only know my experience. But I did have a connection in this job. So I knew someone who had already worked for this company for a few years, had a good reputation, he was in QA, and he was able to reach out to a recruiter who then reached out to me. So I think connections are very important, but I did not have like a specific testing certification before I got my job. Okay, another one I get a lot, which I already answered earlier in the video. Do you need to know how to code? I personally do not. Other QA probably do. I think with automation, you're writing more scripts. I don't know any coding languages. I have started to get decent at finding error logs and writing queries. No, I won't even say I'm decent at writing queries. I have a query that I know works that I just copy and paste. Other than like a very low level fundamental knowledge of that, I don't know any code. This person asked, you get tasks you need to do, scenarios, and test cases. As a team, we vote on the work we want to do, how much we think we can get done in a sprint, and I do kind of get to decide when I'm gonna work on what. It's kind of up to the QA a little bit. Like as the developers finish things, we pull them in to the testing environment, but I do kind of get to structure my day according to priority. But yeah, a lot of the time is up to me to get things finished, and then in meetings sporadically, but you kind of get to decide what you want to work on when within your deadlines and timeframes and whatnot. Okay, I think that's gonna be it for this little video. If you are QA or developer or anything, I'd love to hear your experience and your thoughts, just so more people can get more information. I think knowledge is power, so if people are curious about this job, this is at least my experience, and if anyone else can give their experience, that'd be even better. If you have any other questions for me, leave them down below. I will try to answer them or make a follow-up video or something. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.